In our second PD of the year, we're going to be looking through the short book Power Struggles: Successful Techniques for Educators. I like the little cartoon down here in the corner. This is definitely, I feel like, the way that I grew up in school, with just this unending list of rules. Never seemed to be clear what would get me in trouble, what wouldn't get me in trouble, and it often changed on a daily basis. And I think that at our school in particular, that started to change with the teaching of the behaviors, with the reminder of expectations. So I think these 3 bullets kind of lay out what you need to do as a teacher to avoid power struggles, the kind of setup situation. What you expect as a teacher must be willing to model as well. So if you're going to break that rule all the time, then it's going to cause difficulties. Students will challenge you on it because that's just their nature. Setting clear expectations ahead of time, so not getting those gotcha situations. I haven't seen it so much here, but I've definitely seen it in the past where a teacher almost sets a student up to get into trouble, puts them in a situation where they're unlikely to succeed, and then nails them for it. And I think that's one of those clear situations that you want to avoid, or you're going to end up in a power struggle. See the skill of self-intervention as the ultimate goal. So again, empowering students to be able to make decisions for themselves, and seeing that in yourself, to know that you have the ability, the character and the strength to avoid those situations, and to keep yourself in check and not get drawn into those situations. But what happens when we get into those power struggles, when it's unavoidable, when there's just a student who is determined to draw you in? What's the reason? We often think that. We want to know why they're doing it. Well, the science on this goes back about 50 years, and it's pretty solid at this point. There's different ways of phrasing it, but in this book they refer to 4 different main components. I have a little note up here that behavior is just communication, and every behavior has a motivator. Now, it might not be clear, it might be difficult for us to determine, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a motivator, and it is nothing else besides communication. And if we can think of it like that, we can often take some of the power out of those behaviors and take some of the personal feelings out of that situation. So the first one is attention, too little or too much attention. And they act out to get people to notice them. They want that attention. They crave it. Power. Students are seeking power or control, need to learn and practice ways of influencing the events and people around them by acting out. So if they want power, we want to show them how to achieve that through pro-social means rather than the means that they're currently using. Belonging. Their belonging to the group is tied to disrupting the class. So somehow that sense of belonging that's fostered, they believe, comes from their actions, their maladaptive actions. And competence, cutting the mustard, kind of. Can they do it? If they can see a measure of success, they're more likely to be invested in the classroom setting, in the things that we're doing. If they're struggling, oftentimes that's when you'll start to see behaviors out of students, because they still crave those other things, the attention, the power, the belonging, but they don't have a means to achieve those. So they start looking for other ways to get to satisfy those emotional needs. Now, I love that the book points this out, even though it's obvious. Sometimes it's helpful just being reminded that almost everything that happens is a result of something that we've learned outside of school. We don't spend that much time in school. And it's almost always because of these basic unfulfilled needs. People have a need to get attention, to feel a sense of belonging, to have power, to feel competent. And if they aren't getting those, they often become frustrated, and frustration can lead to those situations where you're in a power struggle, where you lash out in order to get the feeling of control, the feeling of power in a situation where you're otherwise powerless. The prevention strategies that are listed are really easy, but they take consistency and commitment. And I think that that's the difficult thing, because we're human beings too and have our own frustrations and our own challenges and our own pressures. And it's difficult to do that consistently. But if you do, you will see a difference. The first one is one of my favorites, and I try to do it as often as possible. When I get out there and open those doors in the morning, I try and greet every student. If I can remember their name off the top of my head, or notice something about the clothes that they're wearing, just trying to make that connection with them as they come in the door is going to help me later. When I would do small groups or when I had my own classroom, that was the key to really setting up. I would pick out the most difficult kid in class. I remember we had homerooms at the alternative school where I was at, and the principal and I, he asked us to take the most difficult groups of students. So we just took the most difficult groups. And if it wasn't for taking the extra time to form those relationships, it would have been impossible. It was still a challenge. But those relationships, when things went wrong, gave you that little extra buffer zone, that little extra moment, that little connection that could really help out. And it also builds up that 5-to-1 student ratio. I think especially this year, it could be really easy since all the students are kind of released at a common time to your classroom. So being at the door to greet the students, to say hello, to ask, to wish them good luck or to have a good day, or just to make a comment about something that they're wearing, can really start with start the day off well. Start with a clean slate. I think that the clip chart often helps with this. I think that's why I'm a firm believer in that everybody starts in the middle. Start with that kind of clean slate. The difficult part of that is to actually start with a clean slate on your end too. Obviously, moving the clip helps, but so often after students build up a number of negative behaviors, we can physically move the clip to a certain place, but mentally it's tough to get to that clean slate. And I think the other part of it, and I've talked with a few teachers about this, is the movement of the clips. If you're going to use the clip chart, it's so important for students to see that they have the opportunity not just to move down, but to move up, and that there's a fluid movement. The more movement there is, the more invested they're going to be. If they're, do something wrong, they clip down, and it's an hour and a half where they've been working hard and their clip hasn't moved, you're just not going to get that much. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that it's not going to be as effective. So many of these strategies work, like sending a student to the principal's office. It'll modify their behavior for a while. But to sustain that, they need more reinforcement. Their children, especially the smaller they are, things are in and out of their heads in a moment's notice. So the more they can see and connect with something like that, the more they're going to be invested in it and really work to form those habits in their behaviors. The last one I'll point out is one that I especially liked and used while I was a behavior consultant. It's called the 2x10 method. Really simple, really easy way to build a relationship. You just pick a student who you feel might be difficult and find 2 minutes, just 2 minutes each day for 10 straight days to build a different kind of relationship. What you do during that 2 minutes is you just talk about their day, about things that interest them. Stay away from school, stay away from any problems that you might have been having with them or that they might have been having. Just talk about things that interest them. I guarantee by the end of the 10 days, if you're able to do it, it'll be different. There's just no question. Every time I've done this with consistency, with fidelity, the relationship with the student is different afterwards. It takes some consistency, but I think it's a fun thing too, because you really do start to see different pieces of the student's personality, and they often start out where you'll be asking almost all the questions at the start because they'll be so surprised that someone's taking an interest in them, and not just in their schoolwork, but into things that they're interested in. But by the end of it, they're often asking questions of you as well. some additional techniques, and I love part of being at a small school and in a small community is that a lot of these things happen, and I think that's why the number of office referrals and discipline issues at our school are less than at other schools that I've been at. So the first one, out of school relationship building, working to get parents on Remind or other forms of consistent communication and tell them what's working at school. Again, going back to the fact that so many things happen are outside of their control that they've learned before they've gotten to school. This is a good way to prevent things happening at school, is to have that relationship with the parents, to get parents on board. I know a set of parents came in the other day and we're talking about their student, and I offered them this book because they were having trouble with power struggles at home. And certainly these things, a lot of the things that we'll learn in this book apply at home as well and could be useful to many parents. Send notes home, that's pretty standard thing, and looking for other opportunities to partner with parents in building that appropriate behavior, ways that they can learn to set up a homework area or facilitate a good behavior from their students at home will help us at school as well. Opportunities for students to be in charge. I think this one's often overlooked, and that's why I included in these additional techniques. I love that the idea of kind of flipping the script on the students, asking them to help make some of the rules. If things aren't going well, let's say, I'll pick something like things are going poorly in the bathroom, let's say, and you're having trouble with your class, there's stuff happening with them in the bathroom. We'll flip the script on them and see what kind of rules they would put in place and put them in charge of it a little bit so that when things go wrong, it's easier for them to, they have an understanding of what's expected because they're not just helping enforce the rules, but they're building the rules. They're forming the bedrock of those rules. Organize a 1-week positive campaign. So looking for the positive spin, again, flipping the script on a student's behavior. I try this often with students who are challenging, to try and see a negative behavior as something that the student could use in a positive way with just a little bit of molding. So in my example here, defiant becomes opinionated. If you're just defying authority, of course that's going to be problematic at school. But at the same time, if you learn a time and place to use that sort of defiance, you can become opinionated, and that can be a very useful trait out in the world where you're willing to speak your mind and to speak out against bad ideas when they arise. So there's a balance there, but helping students define that can be a tremendous opportunity. Tell less and ask more. Responding to challenges with a question. So a student says, "That's not fair." Really? Do you have a way I can make it better? So again, I think this subtly turns the table on them to see, if they say something's not fair, okay, I'm willing to acknowledge maybe it's not fair. What would you do differently? So again, you're engaging their brain, trying to take the emotion out of it, the power struggle out of it, bringing them back into a thoughtful situation where they have to consider what they did and hopefully learn from that and modify their behavior in the future or learn to avoid that situation altogether. And the last one, we talked about one of the needs, the kind of cutting the mustard, competence. So this goes back to that. Respect and teach different learning styles. So I like this, just giving opportunities for students to feel creative and competent in the classroom. I mean, this is a number one for problem behavior in the classroom. Whenever I reflected on myself, a lesson plan as a counselor or a teacher, and that didn't go well, I could almost always go back to the fact that it just wasn't that interesting, wasn't my best lesson, and you're gonna get problems if students are not engaged, highly engaged. There's just gonna be some problems. I mean, you can expect the good students to be locked in no matter what, the kids in the middle most of the time, but if it's not an engaging lesson, you're going to have some students that are probably causing behavior problems consistently throughout the lesson because they're just not interested, or even worse, can't access it. They're feeling that inadequacy and don't understand what's going on in the lesson, and that goes back to the kind of teaching with different learning styles. These will be the questions for reflection. I thought these were really thoughtful questions, so we'll go over these in our groups during the PD. The first one: when you visit a friend's home, what are some things that he or she does that help you feel welcome? Can you apply these in your classroom? That was a real thoughtful one, I thought, for me. What would I do? Identify a practice that you can do in the classroom without changing your basic style of teaching to promote a sense of connection with your students. Loved that one. That sense of connection, shared camaraderie will take you a long ways. What responsibilities can you do or assign to your students? Love this one. Lots of classrooms are doing this. It's a fantastic way to prevent power struggles, giving them that sense of ownership of the classroom. It's going to take you a long ways. And what values do you believe are necessary for good learning and teaching to occur? So I think that again goes back to the very start. Decide what you expect. Set those clear expectations in the classroom. The final thing, and I'll attach that to this so you can have a chance to look at it as well. Our next one will be on the September the 10th. And your challenge is either to self-evaluate your classroom management or have a grade level partner self-evaluate. Now, if you choose to have a grade level partner come in, then what would happen is I would take their class for that time while they come in and watch and fill out the paper. I think this would be an awesome opportunity. So many times I've heard that it's really good for teachers to see their peers in action, and I think this would be an awesome opportunity. So if anybody wants to do this, I'd love to be a part of that. And we'll pick up from there next time.